We spend our lives gripping tightly to plans, timelines, and outcomes, believing that the tighter we hold, the safer we are. But what if the very act of clinging is what's keeping us stuck? What if all that effort, all that striving, isn't protecting us, but draining us? We confuse control with strength, when in reality, it's often just fear in disguise. And perhaps the moment we stop trying to bend life to our will is the moment life finally begins to breathe through us. There comes a point, quiet, sobering, and unavoidably real, when more effort doesn't equal more results. You've done everything right, pushed past your limits, and chased the dream until your spirit frays. Yet the doors remain closed, the path unclear. You begin to wonder, what am I missing? And in that space between burnout and awakening, a whisper emerges, not to fight harder, but to let go. Not to surrender your dream, but to surrender the weight you've tied to it. There is a deeper intelligence moving through life, one that doesn't respond to force but flows through trust. It's not loud, it's not fast, but it's always speaking, always guiding, always waiting for us to stop yelling over its wisdom. This is where real transformation begins, not in striving, but in softening. Not in pushing harder, but in listening deeper. When we stop trying to control every detail, we become available to the greater rhythm that knows exactly where we are meant to be. The moment we stop pushing, there is a quiet revolution that begins the moment we stop pushing. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or loud proclamations. It arrives in a pause, in a breath, in the space between what we've been forcing and what is gently waiting to unfold. This revolution is called surrender, and though it may seem small, it challenges the very foundation of how we've been conditioned to live. From the earliest moments of our lives, we are taught that striving is survival, that to matter, we must prove ourselves, that rest is laziness, that results are everything. We internalize the belief that if we are not constantly striving, we are somehow falling behind. So we push harder. We chase more. We attach our self-worth to productivity, our peace to external outcomes, and our happiness to tightly controlled plans. But here's the paradox: the more we push, the more life seems to push back. The more we grasp, the more things slip through our fingers. It's as if life itself resists being wrestled into submission. And when we exhaust ourselves, when our plans collapse or our efforts fall short, we begin to wonder, is there another way? That is where surrender begins, not as a giving up, but as a deeper leaning in. It is not apathy. It is not quitting. It is the powerful decision to stop fighting the current and begin to float with it. To stop acting from desperation, and start listening from trust. Surrender invites us to participate differently, with less rigidity and more reverence. It invites us to act, yes, but from clarity, not chaos. To engage, but without obsession. To dream, but without the demand that every detail unfold exactly as we imagined. True surrender is a radical act of wisdom. It is choosing to release the illusion of control, not because we are helpless, but because we are finally ready to stop playing God in a universe we barely understand. It is choosing peace over pressure, presence over panic, alignment over anxiety. Imagine this: you stand before a door, locked, unyielding. You've knocked, pulled, pushed, begged. Sweat clings to your skin. You've told yourself, if I just try harder, it will open. But it doesn't. You burn yourself out in the belief that persistence alone will guarantee results. And then, exhausted and discouraged, you lean back. You breathe. Your gaze softens. And in that moment of stillness, you notice another door. slightly open, quiet, waiting. Not because you earned it, but because you became still enough to see it. This is the magic of surrender. It doesn't always give you what you wanted, but it often gives you what you needed, and reveals what you couldn't see while you were too busy forcing life to follow your plan. Surrender doesn't mean you stop moving forward. It means you stop doing so blindly. You stop pushing out of fear. You stop running from your own discomfort. And you begin to move from a deeper place, from a center that trusts, listens, and allows. There is great strength in knowing when to act and when to allow. When to speak and when to be silent. When to build and when to breathe. This balance is not passive. It is powerful. It is what transforms ordinary effort into meaningful movement. And maybe that's the lesson. Life isn't waiting for us to do more. It's waiting for us to let go of the need to do it all. It's waiting for us to surrender, not our ambition, but our attachment. Not our dreams, but our desperation. Because only when we stop pushing so hard, do we finally make space for life to push back, with grace, with clarity, and with exactly what we didn't even know we were seeking. The trap of control. Control is seductive. It offers the illusion of safety. The false promise that if we can just organize, predict, and dominate every detail, we'll finally feel secure. We plan our days to the minute, outline our goals with rigid precision, and cling to routines like they are life rafts in an ocean of unpredictability. But beneath all that planning, beneath the endless striving for control, lies something much quieter, and more uncomfortable: fear. The truth is, most of our desire to control isn't rooted in confidence. It's rooted in anxiety. We don't micromanage life because we trust it, we do it because we're terrified of what might happen if we don't. We try to control people because we're scared they might leave. We try to control outcomes because we're afraid of failure. We try to control timing because we've convinced ourselves that we are running out of time. And so we grip tighter. We tighten the screws on everything: our work, our relationships, our futures, hoping that if we just hold on tightly enough, we won't lose what we love. But ironically, the more we grip, the more disconnected we become. Control builds walls. It narrows our vision. It chokes creativity, stifles joy, and transforms our days into checklists instead of experiences. It forces us to live in our heads, constantly calculating, constantly forecasting, constantly bracing for disappointment. And in that state, we stop living, we start surviving. The trap of control is that it always demands more. It is never satisfied. Because control is a moving target. As soon as we secure one area of life, a new uncertainty arises. A new problem, a new risk, a new variable. And so we're stuck in a loop: fix, protect, tighten, repeat. But here's the part we don't talk about enough: control isn't real. It's an illusion. A comforting story we tell ourselves to quiet the chaos inside. The reality is, we can't predict the future. We can't manage how others will feel. We can't stop the world from turning or time from moving. And when life reminds us of this, when our plans fall apart, when someone changes, when unexpected events blow through our perfectly ordered world, we often crumble. Not because life has betrayed us, but because we bet our peace on a fantasy. So what's the alternative? Not apathy, not passivity, but surrender. The kind of surrender that says, I will still show up. I will still care. I will still act, but I will no longer force. I will no longer exhaust myself trying to bend life into my shape. Instead, I will collaborate with life. I will co-create with it. I will listen for its rhythm, rather than trying to drag it along to mine. This kind of surrender isn't about letting go of responsibility. It's about shifting the source of our power. Instead of operating from a place of fear, we move from trust. Instead of reacting to what might go wrong, we respond to what's actually happening. Instead of tightening, we soften, and in that softening, we often discover a strength far more enduring than control could ever offer. Because true power isn't found in domination. It's found in flexibility, in resilience, in presence. And only when we step out of the trap of control do we begin to taste the real freedom we've been seeking all along. Not the freedom to manage every outcome, but the freedom to meet whatever comes with grounded, open-hearted courage. Surrender as a strength, not a setback. Surrender is one of the most misunderstood concepts in our modern world. We mistake it for weakness, for apathy, for failure. In a culture that celebrates grit, dominance, and control, the idea of letting go feels foreign, almost dangerous. We're told that to surrender is to quit, to fall behind, to give up on what matters. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if surrender isn't the end of strength, but the beginning of real power? To surrender does not mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you abandon your dreams or drift into passivity. True surrender is not laziness or indifference. It's presence. It's grounded wisdom. It's the conscious choice to stop waging war with reality. It's the recognition that there's a rhythm to life that we can't always predict, but we can choose to align with. This kind of surrender doesn't come from defeat, it comes from depth. It comes from knowing yourself enough to stop proving. It comes from trusting that life doesn't need to be constantly wrestled into submission in order to be beautiful, meaningful, or successful. Surrender is not weakness. It is strength of a different kind, the kind that bends without breaking, the kind that doesn't panic when things shift, the kind that listens before it reacts. It takes far more courage to relax into uncertainty than to pretend we have it all figured out. There is strength in standing your ground. Yes. But there is also strength in stepping aside, in knowing when to let life lead for a while. Surrender is strength because it teaches us to be responsive, not reactive, to pause before pushing, to trust that silence has its place, just as much as strategy, to feel without fixing, to act without attachment. It is a shift from power over life to power with life. Think of an artist. When they grip the brush too tightly, the lines become rigid, the colors muddy. But when their hand softens, when control gives way to flow, the art comes alive. That's what surrender feels like in the soul. It doesn't diminish your vision. It frees it. And in relationships, surrender means no longer trying to shape another person into your image of love. In work, it means letting go of the timeline and trusting the process. In creativity, it means releasing perfection and allowing truth. In healing, it means making peace with not knowing exactly when or how things will get better, but choosing to walk anyway. We've been taught that we earn value through effort. That only when we've pushed hard enough, suffered long enough, sacrificed deeply enough, are we allowed to receive. But surrender turns that logic inside out. It invites us to receive from a different place, not as a reward for exhaustion, but as a natural result of openness. And yes, it's scary, because surrender asks you to trust, not blindly, not recklessly, but wholeheartedly. It asks you to let go of what you cannot control. Not because it doesn't matter, but because clinging to it is slowly draining your soul. So no, surrender is not a setback. It's a reset. It is the point where your anxiety breaks and your awareness begins. It's the moment your identity detaches from achievement and reconnects with essence. It is where striving stops and self comes home. Not to collapse, but to rise, steadier, clearer, truer. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. Not in defeat, but in quiet, conscious, aligned trust. The resistance within us. Not all battles are visible. Some happen in the quiet spaces of our own mind, where desire collides with fear, and purpose wrestles with paralysis. This is the domain of resistance. It doesn't wear armor or shout threats. It whispers. It delays. It distracts. And in doing so, it slowly distances us from the very things we most long to do. Resistance isn't an external force. It lives within us, disguised as procrastination, perfectionism, fatigue, anxiety, or the ever-persistent illusion of not ready yet. It wears the mask of logic. Maybe I need more research. Maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe I should wait until I feel more confident. But behind all those masks is often just one core emotion: fear. Fear of failure. Fear of being judged. Fear that if we give our best and it's not enough, we'll be exposed. Resistance thrives on that fear. And the more meaningful the dream, the stronger it becomes. This is the cruel irony: the more something matters to us, writing the book, starting the business, telling the truth, showing up fully, the louder resistance grows. It wants to keep us safe. It wants to protect us from disappointment. But in doing so, it keeps us small. It cages our voice. It delays our calling. The tragedy isn't that resistance exists. It always will. The tragedy is when we believe that resistance is a signal to stop. But what if it's the opposite? What if resistance is actually a signpost, not of weakness, but of proximity? A signal that we are getting close to something real, something sacred, something worth crossing the threshold for? We're often told to overcome resistance, to fight it like a villain. But what if the wiser way is to understand it, to befriend it, to sit down with it like an old teacher and ask, what are you trying to protect me from? Sometimes, resistance is shielding an old wound. A childhood memory of being shamed for trying. A buried belief that our voice doesn't matter. A pattern we absorbed that says success must come through struggle, and ease is unearned. But when we give resistance space to speak, it begins to soften. It begins to let us pass through, not by force, but by familiarity. Take a moment. Think about the last time you delayed something deeply important. Not because you didn't care, but because it scared you. That's resistance. And it's not proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're human. Even the most successful, disciplined, and creative people in the world face resistance daily. The difference is, they've stopped waiting for it to disappear. They've stopped seeing it as a wall, and started recognizing it as a threshold. Something to be acknowledged, breathed through, and moved with. So what can we do? We can break the illusion of all or nothing. You don't need to write the whole book today, just one paragraph. You don't need to launch the full business, just draft the first idea. You don't need to be fearless to act, you just need to act gently through the fear. The power is not in pushing resistance away, but in choosing presence despite its voice. And yes, some days will feel like quicksand. You'll sit down to work and feel your chest tighten. You'll open your journal and forget every word you meant to write. That's okay. Show up anyway. Show up clumsily, softly, imperfectly. Because every time you do, you retrain your nervous system to feel safe in the discomfort of growth. Resistance doesn't vanish, but your relationship with it changes. You stop being its prisoner and start becoming its student. You stop letting it silence you and start letting it guide you. And maybe, just maybe, that's what surrender looks like in real life. Not running from resistance, not conquering it, but dancing with it. Learning its rhythms, honoring its caution, without letting it steal your destiny. Because beneath that voice saying, Don't do it is another one. Quieter and stronger. Whispering. This matters. Listen to that one, let it lead, and take one step anyway. Trusting the unseen flow. There's a rhythm pulsing beneath everything, a quiet, invisible current that shapes the unfolding of life. You can't always see it. You can't chart it on a map. But you've felt it, those rare moments when things seem to align effortlessly. When life moves with grace instead of resistance. Those moments aren't accidents. They are glimpses into what happens when we trust the unseen flow. But trust. That's the hard part. Trust asks us to relinquish control. To soften our grip on the outcome. To walk forward even when the path is foggy. It doesn't offer guarantees. It doesn't promise perfection. What it offers is alignment. A way of being that no longer wages war with uncertainty but learns to move in rhythm with it. The mind resists this. It wants clarity, schedules, forecasts, data. It wants a sense of I know what's coming next. But the soul speaks another language. It speaks in feelings, in intuition, in the quiet pull toward what you love. Even when you don't fully understand why. To trust the flow of life is to acknowledge that there is an intelligence at work far greater than our plans. Some call it divine timing. Others call it intuition. The universe. God. But whatever name we give it, the principle is the same. There is something guiding us beyond logic. And this guidance doesn't come when we shout. It comes when we listen. It comes in the silence after the breakdown. In the subtle signs your body gives you. In the small synchronicities that make you pause. In the doors that close, and the windows that suddenly crack open. When you stop pushing and finally pay attention, you begin to see that life has been whispering all along. But trust is not passivity. It doesn't mean you sit back and wait for life to rescue you. Trust is active participation without the need to dominate the direction. You still take steps. You still choose. But you do so with humility. With openness. With a willingness to say, I don't know where this will lead. But I'm willing to be led. Think of the river. It never argues with the mountain. It doesn't rush the bend. It curves. Adapts. Moves. Yields. And yet, it gets exactly where it's meant to go. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's flow. To trust the unseen flow means to live differently. To stop measuring progress by what's visible and start honoring what's unfolding beneath the surface. It's knowing that just because nothing seems to be happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. Roots grow in silence. Seeds open in darkness. And sometimes, the most important shifts occur out of view. It also means trusting yourself, your inner compass, your quiet knowing, even when the world around you demands evidence. Especially when it demands evidence. There will be moments when others don't understand your pace, your direction, your choices. That's okay. Trust doesn't need to be validated to be real. It just needs to be practiced. And yes, trusting the flow will challenge your ego. It will stretch your patience. It will test your faith. But on the other side of that discomfort is something richer than certainty, peace. Because when you begin to trust life, not blindly, but with deep presence, you stop needing it to look a certain way in order to feel okay. You stop chasing alignment. You start becoming it. So ask yourself, where have I been trying to force clarity instead of allowing it to arrive? Where am I grasping for control instead of softening into trust? What might shift if I let go, just a little, and began to move with life instead of against it? Maybe everything. Maybe just enough. Maybe exactly what's been waiting for you all along. The power of allowing. We live in a world that celebrates force, that idolizes urgency, that teaches us to make it happen, to seize control, to never stop grinding. In this narrative, allowing sounds like weakness. It sounds passive, ineffective, like letting life slip through your fingers, but allowing, in its truest form, is a quiet superpower. It is not about inaction. It's about intelligent restraint. It's the choice to pause, to notice, to honor timing instead of dominating it. It's the wisdom to know that not all movement is progress, and not all stillness is stagnation. Allowing doesn't mean giving up. It means giving space. It's saying, I trust this process enough not to interrupt it with fear. In nature, everything has its own rhythm. A seed doesn't bloom because you scream at it to grow. A tree doesn't rush its roots because the season demands speed. The sun rises slowly each morning, without fanfare. It doesn't compete or compare. It simply is. And yet, in that being, everything changes. We've forgotten how to be with life like that. How to let things unfold. How to trust our inner pacing. We're constantly intervening, adjusting, fixing, pushing, believing that if we're not doing, we're falling behind. But often, it's our very interference that disrupts the beauty trying to emerge. Allowing is a sacred discipline. It requires strength to witness discomfort without rushing to escape it. It takes maturity to let others have their journey without trying to correct, rescue, or speed it up. It takes clarity to step back and recognize when our urgency is not rooted in truth, but in panic. To allow is to breathe in presence. To stop asking, what can I fix? And start asking, what needs room to grow? Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, for a relationship, for a project, is to back off. Not abandon, but loosen. Let things breathe. Let insight surface without force. Let clarity arrive on its own schedule. This doesn't mean you stop showing up. You still water the seeds. You still listen. You still create containers of care. But you no longer operate from fear that if you don't control every step, everything will collapse. Allowing returns you to the wisdom of partnership. It reminds you that life is not something to conquer. It's something to collaborate with. It is a dance, not a wrestling match. A conversation, not a command. It's in that space of allowing that breakthroughs happen, not because you forced them, but because you created space for them to arrive. In relationships, allowing is what makes room for growth. It's when you stop trying to fix the other person and start trusting their process. It's when you hold space instead of holding pressure. That's when intimacy deepens. That's when authenticity returns. In creativity, allowing is what opens the door to flow. When you stop forcing ideas and start following curiosity. When you let inspiration lead instead of chasing it with clenched fists. That's when art becomes alive, not manufactured. And in your inner life, allowing is what reconnects you with your center. It's when you stop trying to be more, do more, heal faster, know everything, and instead just be, right here, right now, with whatever is true. There is deep intelligence in the act of allowing. Not everything needs to be fixed immediately. Not every silence needs to be filled. Some things resolve themselves when given time and space, just like water clears when left undisturbed. So ask yourself, where am I trying to force what needs more time? Where am I applying pressure when what's needed is patience? What am I trying to control that would flourish if I just allowed? Allowing is not giving up your power. It's realizing you no longer need to prove it. It's choosing presence over panic, flow over force, trust over tension. And in that shift, something begins to move, not because you pushed it into place, but because you finally made room for it to arrive. Releasing the weight of expectations. Expectations are often invisible. We don't carry them in our hands, but we feel their pressure in our chest. We don't see them on paper, yet they script how we think our lives should unfold, how fast we should succeed, how perfectly we should perform, how others should show up for us. And when reality doesn't match that mental blueprint, something cracks inside us. But here's the truth, more often than not, it's not life that's hurting us, it's our expectations about life. We expected the job to fulfill us. We expected the relationship to complete us. We expected our progress to look like a steady upward line. And when it doesn't, we internalize the dissonance. What did I do wrong? Why is this so hard? Why am I not there yet? But pause, what if you're not wrong? What if your expectations were just too narrow, too rigid, too unforgiving? So much of our pain doesn't come from the actual moment we're in, but from the gap between what is and what we thought should be. It's the silent suffering of the supposed to. I was supposed to be further along. I was supposed to have it figured out. I was supposed to feel different by now. But where did those supposed to stories even come from? Were they inherited from culture, imposed by family, fueled by comparison? Most of us are walking through life carrying expectations we never consciously chose. Expectations born from someone else's fear, someone else's timeline, someone else's definition of success. And we wonder why we feel so tired, when in truth, we're not just living our lives. We're dragging a script we didn't write. To surrender expectations is not to stop caring. It's not to lower your standards. It's to reclaim your freedom, the freedom to be present, to be human, to let life unfold in real time instead of through the lens of an imaginary clock. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean you have no vision. It means you stop attaching your worth to how fast that vision manifests. You learn to hold goals lightly, knowing that clinging too tightly strangles their growth. Think of a flower. You plant the seed. You nourish the soil. You give it sunlight and space. But you don't tug on the stem and demand it bloom on your schedule. You trust the unfolding. And when the flower opens, imperfect, unplanned, but beautifully real, it teaches you something about timing that no calendar ever could. That's what surrendering expectations feels like. You stop measuring your day by how much you accomplished, and start honoring how much you were present. You stop expecting others to fulfill every emotional need, and begin giving yourself the love and validation you've been seeking externally. You stop asking life to deliver on your exact terms, and begin listening for what it's offering on its own. Because the truth is, expectations shrink life. They narrow the possibilities. They fixate on one version of happiness and miss the 99 others knocking on your door. When you let go, even just a little, you make space for surprise, for serendipity, for grace. You begin to live not as a puppet to your past assumptions, but as a participant in the mystery of now. So pause and ask yourself, where am I holding on to an old expectation that no longer serves me? What belief about how things should be is keeping me from fully embracing how they are? Release the timeline. Release the perfectionism. Release the rigid outcome. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to meet life as it is. And in that meeting, you might just find the joy you've been expecting all along, only now it comes freely. The sacred pause, finding stillness in a noisy world. In a world that moves at lightning speed, stillness is often mistaken for idleness. We are taught to value motion over meaning, to chase progress at any cost, to fill every gap in our day with tasks, scrolling, noise, silence. In this context, becomes awkward. Emptiness becomes uncomfortable. And rest, genuine, intentional rest, is often misinterpreted as falling behind. But what if stillness isn't the absence of doing, but the presence of being? What if the most important shifts in your life, the healing, the clarity, the transformation, aren't forged in the fire of busyness, but in the quiet of awareness. There is a sacredness in the pause. It's the moment you step out of the rush, out of the noise, and into your center. It's where your nervous system softens, your breath deepens, your vision clears. It's not empty. It's not passive. It's powerful. The pause is where you remember. You remember that you are not your performance. You are not your to-do list. You are not the image you project or the speed at which you produce. You are something deeper, something quieter, something enduring. But we rarely touch that part of ourselves because we don't make time for stillness. We fill the space before it arrives. We interrupt our own clarity with distraction. We confuse activity with aliveness, forgetting that true presence often begins when we stop trying to be anything at all. Stillness doesn't demand that you stop moving forever. It simply invites you to return. Return to the breath. Return to your body. Return to what's here, not what's next. In stillness, resistance reveals itself. So does grief. So does fear. That's why it can feel uncomfortable at first, because what we've been avoiding begins to rise. But with time and compassion, those very emotions become bridges. Bridges back to truth. Bridges back to trust. This is the practice of surrender at its core, not dramatic or performative, but tender, quiet, steady. And it doesn't take hours in a temple or monastery to reclaim this stillness. It begins in moments. A 3-minute breath with no phone in your hand. A walk where you don't try to figure anything out. A moment of watching the wind without needing to name or fix what you're feeling. The sacred pause teaches you to listen to yourself, to life, to that deeper rhythm that doesn't shout but always speaks. It's in this silence that intuition grows strong. That clarity pierces confusion. That energy once scattered begins to return, like a lake settling after a storm. Your inner world begins to reflect the light again, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it to settle. Stillness is where surrender becomes not just a concept, but a felt experience. And eventually, the pause becomes a part of how you live. You no longer react out of habit, you respond from intention. You no longer speak from fear, you speak from presence. You no longer chase life, you begin to dance with it. So ask yourself, where am I rushing through what's meant to be honored? What might I hear if I stopped long enough to listen? What wisdom has been waiting for me, not out there, but in here? You don't have to escape your life to find peace. You just have to stop long enough to return to it. Because the pause is not the end of momentum, it's the beginning of alignment. And in a world that constantly asks you to go faster, stillness becomes an act of quiet rebellion, a declaration that you will not be ruled by urgency, that your life is too sacred to be reduced to speed. This is the sacred pause, and it is always available, one breath at a time. The myth of control, the truth of freedom. We grow up believing that control is power, that the more pieces we can manage, the safer we'll be. That success lies in precision, in planning, in eliminating all variables. And so we chase that illusion with relentless effort, crafting our calendars, calculating outcomes, orchestrating every conversation and decision like a symphony we refuse to let life conduct. But what happens when the world doesn't play along? What happens when people change? When plans fall apart? When the job ends, the door closes, the timing slips through our fingers? We panic, we blame, we scramble to build new scaffolding around a reality we never truly held in the first place. This is the core of the myth. We were never really in control, not of timing, not of other people's emotions, not of the twists and turns of life. And yet, we've attached our piece to this illusion. We've built our identity around having it all together. And when that illusion cracks, We don't just grieve the loss, we grieve the self-image tied to it. But what if that collapse is a gift? What if losing control isn't failure, but freedom? Because here's the truth: control is not power. Control is stress dressed up as structure. It demands constant vigilance, constant tension, constant effort. It keeps us anxious, afraid to let go, afraid to rest, afraid to feel. True power doesn't live there. Real freedom begins the moment you stop clenching. The moment you say, maybe I don't need to grip this so tightly. It begins when you choose to trust the current instead of swimming against it endlessly out of habit. This doesn't mean giving up on plans or goals. It means holding them differently. It means pursuing from a place of presence, not panic. It means taking action without chaining your worth to the outcome. Control says, if I don't manage this, everything will fall apart. Freedom says, I'll show up fully, and trust that I can handle what unfolds. One shrinks your capacity, the other expands it. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming responsive. It means knowing when to lean in, and when to back off, when to speak, and when to listen, when to lead, and when to let life guide you. It means learning to live in relationship with life, not in dominance over it. This shift is radical, because it requires unlearning what we've been praised for. We've been taught that control is strength, that micromanaging is mastery, that productivity is proof of purpose. And so we fear the softening. We confuse surrender with collapse. But surrender is not collapse. It is a conscious release, a powerful choice to stop pretending we're the center of every outcome. It's the humility to know that life is too vast, too alive, too mysterious to be managed, and that maybe that's not a flaw, but the point. Think about it, the most beautiful things in life were never controlled into existence. Love cannot be controlled. Grief cannot be scheduled. Growth does not happen on command. All of them ask us to participate, but not to manipulate. To show up with courage, not control. So ask yourself, where am I exhausting myself trying to force something into place? What am I gripping that's costing me my peace? What might open if I loosened, even slightly? You are not your plans. You are not your precision. You are not here to hold the universe together with your bare hands. You are here to engage, with heart, with presence, with trust. And when you do, you'll discover a truth deeper than control. You were never meant to manage everything. You were meant to move with life, not against it. And in that movement, you will find a freedom no amount of control could ever offer. The paradox of surrender, when letting go brings more. It doesn't make sense, at least not to the rational mind. How could letting go possibly lead to more? How could surrender, a word so often associated with defeat, be the very key to abundance, peace, and alignment? But life, in its quiet wisdom, has never operated by linear logic. It operates in paradox. And in the realm of paradox, the act of surrender becomes a gateway, not to less, but to everything you were truly seeking. When we hold tightly to outcomes, we become narrow. Our vision shrinks to a single possibility. We grasp, we chase, we try to force things into form. And sometimes, we succeed, at least on the surface. But there's a cost: our peace, our presence, our ability to breathe in the moment. We become captives of our own ambition. But when we surrender, not as a last resort, but as an act of faith, we open a different kind of door. One we didn't even know was there. One that doesn't lead to what we thought we wanted, but often, to something even better. This is the paradox. The more we try to control love, the more it slips away. But when we allow love to be what it is, without needing it to fill every void, it expands. The more we obsess over success, the more elusive it becomes. But when we do meaningful work from a place of joy rather than desperation, success flows in, quietly, generously. The more we try to force healing, the more we feel stuck. But when we create space and compassion, healing moves through us in its own time. Letting go doesn't mean we stop caring. It means we stop carrying what was never ours to hold. We stop carrying timelines we can't control. We stop carrying identities that no longer fit. We stop carrying people's opinions like bricks on our back. We set them down, not because they're unimportant, but because they are too heavy to walk forward with. And in that space, something miraculous happens. We notice the path beneath our feet again. We hear our own voice again. We rediscover the joy that was buried beneath striving. Surrender brings more, not through accumulation, but through clarity. It strips away what's false so we can receive what's real. It's not a giving up, it's a giving over, to something wiser, deeper, larger than ego. And yes, the ego will resist. It will scream that if you stop pushing, you'll fall behind. That if you don't force, you'll be forgotten. That letting go is weak. That surrender is dangerous. But that voice has never brought you peace. That voice has only kept you spinning. Try this instead. Take one thing you've been gripping tightly, one dream, one plan, one relationship, one fear, and whisper, not with apathy, but with deep reverence, I don't have to control this. I can love it, show up for it, and still let go. That's surrender. That's power. And ironically, beautifully, it's often in that moment, when you least expect it, that the thing you've been longing for arrives. Not because you chased it, but because you became ready to receive it. You softened, you stopped resisting, you made space. And life filled that space, not with what you wanted, but with what you needed all along. This is the paradox. When you let go, you don't lose, you open. And what comes rushing in is not scarcity, but abundance, alignment, and a peace that striving could never offer. The return, living with surrender as a daily practice. Surrender is not a one-time act. It's not something you do once in a moment of desperation and never revisit. It's not a dramatic finale, it's a quiet return. Return to presence. Return to breath. Return to trust. We often imagine surrender as a grand spiritual event, something that happens at the climax of our struggle. But the real magic lies in its daily, subtle embodiment. It's not about leaving your responsibilities or goals behind, it's about the spirit in which you carry them. Surrender is choosing peace over panic, again and again. It's saying yes to this moment, even if it doesn't look how you wanted. It's pausing in the midst of overwhelm to remember, I don't have to carry it all. It's in the way you speak to yourself when things don't go as planned. It's in how you hold space for others, without trying to fix or control them. It's in the gentle shift from how can I force this to happen, to how can I align with what wants to unfold. Living with surrender doesn't mean living without desire or direction. It means walking with openness, with listening, with humility. It's planning with a pencil instead of a permanent marker. It's dreaming big, but not becoming a prisoner to how those dreams arrive. It's knowing that sometimes what looks like a detour is actually divine redirection. Surrender is the moment you stop demanding that life obey your script and start co-writing it with grace. It's a softening, not of your strength, but of your rigidity. It's a loosening, not of your standards, but of your need for control. It's a remembering that you are not separate from life, but deeply connected to its flow. Each morning, you can choose to surrender, not by abandoning responsibility, but by releasing the illusion that your worth depends on controlling every outcome. Each evening, you can reflect, where did I resist today? Where did I trust? These small moments of awareness are powerful. They begin to rewire your nervous system from survival to surrender, from contraction to openness, from fear to faith, and over time, surrender becomes not just a practice, but a posture, a way of being, a steady, quiet confidence that you are held, even when you don't have all the answers. Because the truth is, you were never meant to know everything in advance. You were meant to participate, to follow the threads, to dance with uncertainty, to fall and rise and soften and grow, to return, again and again, and that's the beauty of it. If you've made it this far, it means something in you is awakening. Maybe it's a whisper, maybe it's a deep knowing, maybe it's just the sense that there must be another way, a way that doesn't burn you out, break you down, or leave you constantly chasing the next finish line. And you're right. There is another way. It's not louder. It's not faster. It's not flashier. It's quieter, truer, more sustainable. And it begins not with doing more, but with letting go. Letting go of the pressure to prove yourself. Letting go of the timelines that exhaust you. Letting go of the idea that life only loves you when you're performing. Because life isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's waiting for you to be present. And presence is born the moment you release the need to control everything. You don't have to fight your way forward anymore. You don't have to carry what's too heavy. You don't have to know how the whole path unfolds. All you have to do is trust the next right step. Then take it, with soft hands, with an open heart, and with a willingness to let grace do what force never could. This is what surrender gives you, not less strength, but a new kind of strength. The strength to pause, the strength to listen, the strength to walk away from what no longer aligns and toward what brings you home to yourself. And when you live from that space, life shifts, subtly, powerfully, authentically. Not always in the ways you planned, but often in the ways you needed most. So if you're still trying to control the uncontrollable, breathe. If you're tired of striving but afraid to stop, pause. If you've forgotten how to trust, begin again. Gently. Slowly. Now. Because surrender isn't a sign you're losing. It's a sign you're finally listening. And that, my friend, is the beginning of everything. Thank you for being here, truly, for walking with me through these ideas, for choosing presence over pressure, and for being brave enough to soften in a world that tells you to harden. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you love. Reflect on it in your journal. Save it for the days when surrender feels far away. And if you'd like more reminders, insights, and soul-deep conversations like this, subscribe, follow, and stay connected. We're building a community where softness is strength, where presence is power, and where you are deeply enough, just as you are. Until next time, keep surrendering, keep trusting, and keep returning to the place within you that was never broken. This is not the end. It's just the beginning of a gentler, wiser, more aligned you. There is no arrival point, only deeper layers of release, only greater capacity to trust, only more spaciousness to live, breathe, and love with your whole heart. So let surrender be your practice. Let it live in your breath, your choices, your pauses, your prayers. Let it guide how you work, how you love, how you listen. Let it remind you that you don't have to chase alignment. You can become it. Because when you do, something shifts. Life begins to meet you. Grace begins to find you. And what once felt like struggle transforms into sacred partnership. This is not the end. This is the return. And you are ready.